which was illegal, but I found a bar that would serve me. Because the drinking age was above my level. And I just decided, do I really want to do this for the rest of my life? And the answer was no. And a friend of mine from the agency had gotten a job with 7-Eleven of all places. But the money was even better than what I was making. So I decided, okay, I'll do that. So worked there for a brief period of time, was almost immediately promoted to assistant manager. And this is when the stores were owned by a company called Southland Corporation out of Dallas, Texas. They made their money, believe it or not, from ice. They had started back in the day when people really didn't have refrigerators, and they used to deliver ice blocks to people's houses to put in the refrigerator to keep their food cold. Mm-hmm. But then they invented this thing called a Slurpee. And the majority of their profits came from bloody Slurpees, flavored ice. But anyway, so they put me in charge of this store, which was 27 out of 28 in, turnover and everything else. They would do either monthly or quarterly audits. I forget what it was. But anyway, I took my store from 27 to number 4 out of the regional group that I was part of. And then they decided that they were going to go into the franchise business. So each store at that time had, I don't know, $28,000, $45,000 worth of inventory. So they basically said, okay, here's the deal. We'll, we'll front all the product on the shelves, and we'll, sell you a franchise for $1. And then from the profits, when we do our audits, we will reduce until you actually own the contents as well. And after that, you get to keep all the money. So again, I said, do I really want to do that for the rest of my life? And the answer was no. So I turned it down. What I didn't think of, which is what one of my friends in the company did, and he told me I was stupid after the fact. And, he goes, he sold his store for $65,000 4 years later. And I didn't realize, I could have taken the thing, made some money while I was doing it, because I was making good money. And I was driving a beautiful little Chevrolet convertible. I had a place down the Jersey Shore, a 20-year-old, partner or, a kid, and, sold that, bought a Jaguar XKE convertible, of course, red. Beautiful, beautiful car. We could do a whole interview just on the cars that I've owned that are worth.
They all Jags?
No, my first car was a 1955 Chevrolet that I bought for $50. I could sell for 30 grand today. The Jag I bought for $2,000. I could sell that for 150. And then the 3 Mercedes, we don't want to go there. So anyway, so I got out of that and I worked in what we called in America a head shop.
We've got someone coming, so
I guess I better shut up or stop telling these stories at least.
we'll come back to it. But I was going to say with the ice, recently I was in LA with Bobby and I both do.
It's a different kind of ice now, Joe. Don't buy it.
Hang on, let me finish.
Sorry.
I was with our improv teacher, who's called Dave Rosowski, and we went into his local store, which he said, "Oh, this is a really posh local store. This is where Justin Bieber gets his groceries." And there was ice, Sophie, for $30. $30 ice.
Water.
I know that's like a third of the price of ice in San Diego. What's going on up there? What's the name of that shop again?
There we go. That's the kind of level of banter we want. Right.
Well, I don't know if I can keep up with you two. I'll try though.
Oh, we know that you've got a little bit of the radio. I did a bit of digging in.
You've got the voice for it. Like you've got that like midnight, like Soul Train voice. It's like that.
Well, you actually are not far off, Bobby, but this is not my radio voice. Maybe I'll when we really get into the interview, I'll change the tone, and then you'll be able to really catch the Doug.
We had was it the number 5 voice, which was the kind of sexy voice.
Well, as I said, Joe, I mean, if you close your eyes, it actually is kind of sexy. At least that's what I've been told. And there is one story that I can't tell from when I first came over here, or when I left a voicemail on Melanie's, thing, and her partner just made some lewd comments about it. But there we go.
People come strictly for the lewd comments. So.
Oh, okay. In that case, basically, she said, oh my God, is that Doug? Yeah. I just want to take the phone and rub it on my neat.
Oof. I had a voice part in a film, and my role, it was an Irish film, and part of the voiceovers I did was for a computer game back then, and it was, ouch, you got me. Please reload your weapon. Do you want to fight? It's like, that was so much fun. I really enjoyed that. We've got Heather and Jeff.
Hi, Heather.
Welcome to you.
Hey, Jeff.
Hey, everybody. Welcome aboard. Don't know why you're here. I guess it's obviously for, Bobby and his den.
That looks like
I don't get out much.
Den. It does look like a great den.
Neither do I. I'm trapped in this virtual world. I feel like I'm in, what was the movie with, he gets sucked into the cartoon,
Oh, Jumanji?
No, the one with Jeff. It was with all the future thing and the bikes and the
Tron.
Tron, exactly.
Oh, Tron. Yeah.
I feel like I'm in Tron. I'm in a virtual world these days.
We
and
are.
I do say virtually a lot now, unintentionally, but So you're here virtually with the Dougster.
I think that's a great start. We should ask what your favorite film is, and everybody can say what their favorite film is as well.
Okay, well, mine's going to be a weird one. Little Big Man.
Ooh, and why is that?
I love anything that is historical in nature. And this particular movie featured Dustin Hoffman as the main character when he was very young. This was even probably shortly after The Graduate. And he basically was being interviewed by this guy because it started out where he's 104 years old. And he is telling stories about the Old West, where, he met, Bill Hickok, and he was adopted by an Indian tribe. But it showed honestly how the white Americans wiped out the Redskins for no reason whatsoever. So it was kind of historically accurate. And it was the first movie I'd seen that really showed what it might have been like life back in the old, as it were, Wild West. But, it's a good movie. In fact, I still have it stored ready to watch again. Haven't seen it in years, but, thoroughly enjoyed it. Highly recommended. Look, there's so many other movies that I loved, but, that one sticks out for some reason. Anyway, that's that.
No, that's awesome. Just while we're waiting for people to come on, Bobby, I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite movie?
I'm going to disappoint you terribly because I don't have a favorite film. Like, I love films, but I can't point to one film and say it's that. Or if I did,
imagine we are
change.
going to take your cat and murder it if you don't have a favorite film.
Oh, then it would have to be Breakfast at Tiffany's because the cat was named Cat and the whole theme was built around the cat. And at the end, I was very unconcerned about like the two of them getting together. What was most important is in the middle of the rainstorm, they were able to effectively relocate the cat named Cat, because if you name a thing, you own a thing, and a cat is a wild thing. It can never be owned. So yeah, Breakfast at Tiffany's in that context.
I love the push point. Jeff, what's your favorite film?
Which Jeff? Oh, it's no more Jeff. It's me.
No more Jeffs.
Hello everyone.
I have one Jeff today. Budget cuts.
Oh, depends of the intensity. About, for example, war, sci-fi.
Your
Depends
cat's about to be blown up. Which film is it?
Why the cat gets it in this scenario all the time?
I didn't hear about the cat, the cat, but one of my favorite films is Aliens Return, and they've been asking a question like, "What's the name of Ripley's cat?" I never hear about it.
I never heard about Ripley's cat.
No, I don't know.
How do we get in this cat theme?
So next on my screen is Revo Cycle. welcome. Thank you for joining us. You've been
Hey,
thrown
it's
to the deep end.
it's my pleasure. And by the way, my name is Michael. I need to fix that on my
It's a
Zoom.
bit of a mouthful, Michael, to be fair, but I was like,
My name's Michael Hosking, and are you asking me what my favorite film is? Is that what you? Oh,
yeah.
well, it's the piano.
Oh,
Okay.
I am a music lover. I am an artist of sorts. I'm a photographer, and I just find that film visually stunning. And I will never get the image of that piano coming in on the waves on the palette. I just think it's beautiful, and the soundtrack is amazing. I listen to it all the time. So the piano is what I'd say.
Agree.
We
Cool.
just went to a total different level of sophistication on the show.
No cats.
No
no
cats.
cats involved. Yeah, no cats threatened on that
No
one.
threats. There are no threats whatsoever.
I'm looking forward to hear Heather's, if you can unmute Heather. We'll give.
Well, mine was that, again, probably just disappointment was Grease, because it was the first album I remember when I was 11, and my mom and dad hid it in my, like in a bunch of albums, and it started my love of musical theater, which started my theatrical career. And
Cool.
so I just always loved it. I loved the musical, and I loved the movie as well. So
I love that film.
well, my acting teachers asked me what role I most wanted to play, and I said Candy. And he gave me grief about it. And I said, "You didn't ask me what I wanted to win an Oscar for. You asked me what role I wanted to play."
See, I had a
Never
really,
seen it.
I loved Grease until they were going to do it at school. And I thought, hang on a minute, the whole moral of that story is if you want to get somewhere, dress like a whore and say you're going to give it out. I mean, like, I'm not sure that's appropriate for.
There are some serious problematic things going on in Greece when you
right.
look at it with adult eyes.
Yeah,
It's true. We went to the drive-in. Joe, we went to the drive-in. Left was there, and like they had the words up for the sing-along, and he was like appalled at some of the words that were in the songs "Grease Lightning" and stuff. And I was like, "Yeah, that's pretty much what it says in the."
Who knew that asking people what their favorite film was going to be so entertaining? Hi, Eric. You come in.
Hi.
We've been just starting off as a little warm up to see what our favorite film is, and you're next on my screen. So from Greece, what's your favorite movie?
Ta-dan.
She's going to kill your cat if you don't give
Yeah,
me.
Eric's frozen. By the way, anyone, if you don't have a favorite movie,
Wizard of
Oh,
Kane.
Oh my
Okay.
gosh.
Right.
He's got
Citizen
visual
Kane,
support.
Orson Welles.
Great call.
Abbott and Costello meet Mr. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Hold That Ghost, 1943. Meet the Invisible Man, 1947. And Meet Frankenstein, 1948.
My God, we have a
So
ringer
you guys
here.
know,
That's
I'm actually a movie guy.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
that's like a mic drop moment, isn't it?
I know.
So-
We can all go at this point.
You asked.
Love it.
No cats involved. Oh.
No. Oh, brilliant. I love that, Eric. Jasmine.
Yeah, so
Jasmine's
that's
next.
that's one of my other loves outside of, because I live right up the street from Hollywood. So
There we go.
Ah.
We can see it. We can see it.
Jasmine, if you've got a favorite movie,
Oh God, put me on the spot. It would have to be Blade Runner. I love how stylish that film is.
Another great
And
one.
greasy
Harrison
and
Ford.
stylish at the same time.
first one,
Yes.
The first one, yes.
of course.
Sure.
Anna, have you got one? Mine would not be highbrow, by the way. Anna can't talk and she doesn't have one. Your cat's getting it, Anna. That's
That's
it.
it.
The cat's
No.
gone.
Oh dear.
Oh, I think mine would be Calamity Jane.
That's an odd choice. Why?
Why?
Calamity Jane?
Yeah, do you know, I nearly never spoke to my brother ever again because I watched that film, I think almost 8 times back to back. I just absolutely loved it. And when Clam comes in and she's got, her beautiful dress on and then she just lands face down straight in mud, I just thought that's just brilliant. I mean, the whole thing about it. But we'll get on to singing another time because that would take up too much.
So we are into
Why are you killing
films,
your
cats,
brother?
and
What was that?
Why are you killing your brother?
Because, oh yes, I forgot to say that I'm killing my brother because he wanted to video something, with tapes you had in those days. And so he wanted to videotape some awful program and he taped over my Calamity Jane.
over.
Oh,
So I lost my Calamity Jane.
I know what to get you for Christmas.
Yeah.
Oh, so Bobby and I would like to welcome Doug Miller to today's call. Thank you all very
Welcome,
much.
Doug.
Okay, pleased to be here, guys.
Thank you all so
I
much.
haven't figured out why I'm invited.
Oh, you're the main man of the guest today. So I don't know if
voice.
any of you have met Doug before, and but
Say
Doug
no.
has pretty much, I think, been in most industries, but from radio, politics, nearly 7-Eleven. But I'm not going to take all of it away from you. I think basically you've been following my career, but that's probably in the reverse order.
Okay. Well, you gonna ask some questions, or you just want me to do
Well,
what I
just
normally do, which is
my Yeah, no, my first question actually is because if you give people a little bit of a brief insight of the many different careers you've had, and I wondered what were the common threads between all of them that you learned for communication?
well, it's a relatively checkered career. As you can see from the image, I'm an old man. Been around the block a couple of times. You may have also figured out that I'm an American. So I obviously grew up in a small town in South Jersey, New Jersey. Uh, Most times I say I'm from Philadelphia. That's where I did spend a lot of my adult life. And first job was insurance. Second job was managing a 7-Eleven store, which I turned down an opportunity to buy the franchise for $1. Went from there to something in America, which now I'll somewhat date myself here, which was in the early 70s. Sex, drugs, rock and roll, and Vietnam War protests. But we had these things called head shops. And in the head shop, and I basically went from managing 7-Eleven to managing the Gooseberry Sanitarium was the name of the store. And we sold incense, black lights, posters, bell-bottom jeans, records, 8-track tapes. We did installations in a garage of 8-track tapes in the cars. And I did that for a while, met my future ex-wife shortly thereafter, who convinced me to go back to school, which I did. And wandering around the campus, I wandered into the campus radio station and basically took a gig as a DJ, quickly became the assistant manager, then the manager of that. And then obviously I was aspiring. My education was radio, television, film. I chose the radio because, let's face it, I don't have the face for TV nor the body. So I happened to go to a party at a major radio station in Philadelphia, not snuck in, but kind of handed my demo tape to the program director, and he was on the phone, and he was talking to a label, and I could just from the conversation I knew what he was talking about, and he was unfamiliar with it. So when he was hitting pause, I said, "Okay, well, the manager is so and so, the label's Asylum. This is the second album. The fourth song on the second side is the one that you should be playing." And so on and so forth. And he hung up the phone after he finished calling. He goes, "Can you do that with anybody else?" I said, "Name somebody," because I was seriously into music. And, I did. And I went home from the party, and about 10 o'clock at night, I got a phone call. "Can you get back here for a midnight shift?" Needless to say, I was a little bit excited, jumped on the opportunity, and did that for a couple of years. Worked in radio in Philadelphia. And if you want to, I can actually get into the radio voice. This is Doug. You're with me on Quad 94 WYSP. And right now we got some Springsteen from Born to Run. Anyway, that evolved because then I started being on the inside. I got into concert promotion. And I've actually worked and been involved with 33 shows, 32 of which were sold out. Worked in Miami, Jacksonville, Wilmington, Delaware, Philadelphia, around a few times. And had the opportunity, again, I'm from Jersey. So we booked Springsteen in the early days when he had only one album, and he had been just signed to Capitol Records, and the label execs had never seen him. So he came down to the gig, an 800-seat hall, where we sold tickets for $4. And they sat there and saw the new act that they had just signed, but he didn't have any material. So Clarence Clemens had come from Sam and Dave and the Isley Brothers. So they did covers of early rock and roll songs to fill up the 3-hour show. And another kind of cool story in those days, I also promoted Billy Joel when he had one album. And so I was interviewing him on a hill, and it happened to be his birthday. And I had booked a bar for an after show party, which turned into a birthday party for him. And so we're sitting there and he gets off the phone. His face is bloody white. Like, what's the problem? Because the equipment truck in Connecticut, they got arrested and they've put the truck in impound. I can't get any equipment. I don't have my equipment. My band can't go on. I'm like, oh, Jesus Christ. So I said, well, look, I've got a band booked over at this nightclub, so I can get their equipment over here in an hour. And we had a really bad opening act. And, basically, the audience was practically booing them. And I'm like, oh, man, what am I going to do? So, Billy, what can we do here, man? He goes, well, do you have a piano? I said, yeah, we got the baby grand that, you requested. He goes, okay. So he goes in and he starts doing imitations of Leon Russell and Elton John for 45 minutes until they basically went to the impound yard and took the equipment out of one truck and lifted it over the fence into another truck. And were actually able to make it to the gig, which meant he got late there to the party. But yeah, he was running around in a Flyers t-shirt, chasing all the young college girls and having a good old time. Anyway, enough with the rock and roll stories. Went from there and the concerts. I got in a car accident and they basically wanted to operate. I was in traction for 6 weeks. And they said, well, you can swim and exercise or you can have surgery on your spine. And I said, well, I ain't doing that one. So 2 weeks later, I moved to Fort Lauderdale, Florida, where I got involved in the presidential campaign of Ted Kennedy. And I was on national staff doing fundraising and coordinating 400 volunteers and all kinds of crazy stuff. And the senator obviously lost. Jimmy Carter won. And my volunteers wanted me to run for Congress. Now, I was 29 years old and I had inhaled. So I just decided, well, maybe that's not the best career choice. Plus, during the time with Kennedy, I was exposed to, let's just say, the seedy, dark quarters of fundraising that politicians use. I just decided, no, I do not want to get into this. So I went to work in a health club as a salesperson. Now, with the head shop, with I was involved in sales, but, really not. But kind of came instinctively, I guess, to me. So went to work in a health club, had never exercised. It was a big club on the verge of bankruptcy, and met this guy who hired me, who later became my business partner. And we turned the club around and improved the sales by 560% in 6 months. An article was written about us in a magazine, and we had 120 calls from clubs around North America asking if we could do for them the same thing. Long story short, first club, we improved their sales by 450% in 6 months. And we started working. There was no pseudo consultants, so we didn't have anybody to kind of copy. And so basically, we started Sales Makers with the catchphrase membership specialist. And that's what we did. We focused on selling memberships and making money for the clubs. And did that all throughout the 80s. And then in 89, we went international with a club in Stockholm, Sweden, and a build out of a new club here in England. And it was a pre-sale, and no disrespect, to the British audience here. You guys were clueless about sales. So the old
Can I interrupt you for a moment?
yes.
Seems as you're insulting British people, it seemed like a good moment to do that. But I just wondered if we could delve into, because of so many different industries you've been into, did you have any prior sales experience, or was it everything that you learned in that communication through those different places of work that you brought in and seemed to make it so successful?
All of them had one common thread, Joe, which were human beings and people and communication and how you dealt with your various and sundry customers. And yes, certainly with the head shop, convincing people to buy this 8-track tape and do the installation because it wasn't cheap in those days. It was a little bit of sales experience. And then the radio, not so much, nor the music, other than how I learned in radio this thing called outreach that I applied very liberally in my sales career within our industry. In those days, most clubs and America was included in this as well. The clubs were new, they were exciting, people were coming in, but they weren't closing them. They weren't closing the sales. They were, they didn't know how to close. So it was something where where I really got my skill set was working in that club for a couple of years, the very first club, where I created without knowing about it something that not Brian Tracy, but he's actually British. He Tony Bazan, who invented mind mapping, uses the term, and I love it. Synesthetic sales, stimulating the senses, and the more senses you stimulate in any sales process, the better you're going to engage your potential customer. But then, and this is something I learned early on, 60% of every salesperson in the world does not ask for the order. And so any process that you're dealing with in sales, the golden rule, very simply, make sure you ask the customer to buy, but you don't use yes or no questions. You try to put the prospect in the picture so that and you ask the right qualifying questions, and I mentioned this to you yesterday when we chatted, the old axiom that we used, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth so that you can listen twice as hard as you talk. What defines the best salespeople in any idiom is their ability to listen and determine the needs and desires of the prospect and assure them that they are going to get what they're looking for by purchasing whatever product or service that you're offering to the consumer. But you do it in such a way, in the way I used to wrap up my sales tours. And this again is the synesthetic part of things. One thing that gyms have got, some of them quite a few, are mirrors. So, I'll ask you to do this while we're on here all, and you can do it at home. Take your arms and stretch them straight out, and then gradually take them out and tell me when you stop seeing your arms. And you have the ability, because we all have, well, maybe some people are afflicted without it, peripheral vision. Kind of a 360 eyeball view of the world. And so with that in mind, and I learned this, I was doing okay as a salesperson. And I had decided it was time for a new car. And it was a toss-up between a Merc and a Jag. So I, took this Jag out, a beautiful XJ6, and, very nice. And then I went and I found a Mercedes that also happened to be white. And so I take it out for a test drive with the salesman, and he brings me back to the showroom, and he says, park between the green lines. So I park between the green lines. And if you've ever been to South Florida or California, you know that quite a few of the stores will have the reflective film on the windows so that the showroom doesn't turn into an oven because of the sun, because of the heat. So I pull up in the Merc, and I've got a full length body shot of me sitting in the Merc when I look sideways. And the image in front of me is my smiling face and this three-pointed star sitting there. And he turned over and he reached for the keys. He said, "Would you like to take care of the financing, or would you rather have me take care of it for you?" And I laughed at him. I said, "That is the best assumptive close I've ever had. You seriously put me in the picture." So when you're giving your tours and your clubs, whatever, position yourself in front of a question, in front of a mirror, and ask the question, "So, can you see yourself taking any classes in the studio here?" And they're looking at you, but their peripheral vision, they're looking in the mirror and they see themselves in the room. They literally, I'm integrating the left and right side of the brain, the logic and the emotional side. And 9 times out of 10, oh yeah, I could see myself here a couple times a week. When I ended my tour, because I needed to swim and exercise because of the back, the last stop I would make on my tour would be the indoor heated pool in the club. And I would reach down, feel the water. This is where you're going to find me when I'm done my shift today. And inevitably, they'd reach down and they'd feel the water. I was stimulating the sense of touch, sight, hearing, and that made me an extremely effective closer and started me on my long sales career. And I, went to conferences with Zig Ziglar, Brian Tracy, read the books, listened to the tapes, and because you can never stop learning. And that really was, how it all evolved, I guess. And that resulted in Ray and I speaking at conferences, conventions all over the world. I've worked with hundreds of clubs, trained thousands of salespeople, been to dozens, if not well over 100 conferences, and been responsible for the sales of millions of memberships globally in my 46-year career. The sales bit and a little sneak preview. I was in Italy. Casey Conrad was booked to speak at a conference for URSA. She missed her flight. I was there. They were canceling her session. I said, "Look, I can take it over." They asked me to present. I did. I had to use her PowerPoint, which was a first. I'd never used another presenter's slides before. A bit awkward, and then Bobby and Joe could think and agree with that. How comfortable are you going to be doing somebody else's presentation? Anyway, I did it. But at the beginning of the thing, Hans Munch, who was the European director at the time, comes out. He goes, "Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Casey can't make it, but we've got Doug Miller here, the grandfather of sales." Now, I was only in my 60s then. So I walk on the stage, and I normally will wear a big blue lapis ring. And so, I come on stage and say, "Thank you, Hans, for that, introduction." I said, "I just do want to correct one thing. And remember, I'm in, Milano, Italy." I said, "I'm not the grandfather of sales." And I held out my hand and I said, "I'm the godfather of sales," holding out the ring. So in about 6 weeks, I'm launching a podcast, The Podfather of Sales. And it's just going to be me telling stories about my dubious career and the book that I've written that is called X, the letter X, Selling at Membership Sales. A how-to, but it's also not my autobiography, but there's a lot of stories in that sucker. So I'm just going to tell stories for 20 minutes once a week.
I think that's great. What I love about that is what people can take away, whether they're here as club owners, operators, or we've got a few personal trainers in as well. And selling is always hard for trainers. I think they get into it because they absolutely love what they do, but sometimes asking for, I was all right because I was brought up as the daughter of a sewing machine dealer. And I think I sold my first sewing machine when I was about 5. I was actually making a little fluffy lion at the time, and I sold my machine. So the only heartbreak I had was they literally packed up my sewing machine and gave it to the customer. But I remember selling in a convention, and there was a woman looking at the overlockers, and there were 3 other women that were getting quite excited. And when this woman said, "Yes, I'll have one," because I said, "Oh, and today you get this ruffler foot." No idea what ruffler foot was, but it came with it. And then the other 3 bought it. And on the way out, I heard the woman say to her friend, "So what is it we've bought?" But she got totally just carried away with the whole excitement of this thing. But if you don't mind, I would like to bring Bobby into this because he's got a great story about sales, because you've become very good at selling, but your first experience wasn't, I think, quite relates to trainers as well.
Oh, I'm the exact opposite of Doug. I was not a ringer at all. I was abysmal. First, can I go back to something that you had asked Doug earlier? Because I think it's critically important. And it was about the common thread through which his career story is interwoven. And what I noticed, there's a few things. I witnessed living back in New York, where people would rock up from overseas and they'd migrate to New York. And then within a few weeks, all these spectacular things would happen for them. All these opportunities would emerge. And people who had been living in the city their entire life never were exposed to these opportunities. I was like, what is it about these people? Are they just more charismatic? Are they lucky? And then I realized, no, they were new and they just put themselves in positions. They had this level of openness. Now, I didn't have a parental structure growing up. That's a totally different podcast. But a lot of the adults, the responsible adults, and there weren't all that many, but there were a few, they seemed to have the same implicit message. You want to go to school and study really hard and get good grades, because then you can go out and you can get yourself a good job. And a good job is one that pays well, has benefits and has security. And you can sit on the 17th floor of a 40-story skyscraper, passing papers from one side of the desk to the other for the next 25 years. And then as a reward, you get to retire. Well, how's that working for most people? I think there's value in experimentation. I think there's value in a non-linear path, because what I'm listening to in Doug's story is every single career choice he made where they're seemingly incongruent. He said gave him the communication skills, the people skills. By the time he finally landed where he stayed and the career that he built his legacy on, there was nothing wasted. And I just want to call that out because I love that about your story, Doug. Thanks for sharing that. My story was, I was a deformed kid growing up in a really violent environment. And my first career landed me in the gyms. And then at 18 years old, I got hired. For whatever reason, the owner of the organization took a liking to me. And because of this liking, he did something that didn't go over well with me at first. He called me into his office and said, if you're going to go anywhere in this organization or any organization, you have to understand the sales end of the business. We are promoting you from like a head trainer into sales. And I freaked out because I was like, no. I'm a trainer. I just want to help people and help people. It's like initiating the first decision, the most critical decision of that first step that the member's going to take that could change the entire trajectory of their life. Explain to me how that's not helping someone. I was like, shit, because really, I didn't want to be found out. The owner of the company had put so much faith in me, and he had gone around and said, oh, we're putting Bobby in sales. Wait until you see Bobby in sales. Bobby's going to be incredible at this. So I was like, I didn't want to be measured and disappoint him. So he sent me to all the same seminars that Doug went to, maybe not the same exact ones, but like Dr. Dennis Waitley, and bought me Tony Robbins tapes, sent me out to see Brian Tracy, and he gave me all of this investment. And then I got out in sales, and I would say about 6 weeks into it, he called me into his office, and he was like, wow, you were right. You are horrible at this. I'd like to say I was bad at sales, but I don't think I performed actually that well. I think I was markedly the worst. They didn't even believe that anyone could be as bad as I was. As a matter of fact, if people just kept guests away from me and just said, hey, want to buy a membership, that would have increased the likelihood that they would become a member more than talking to me. So I got fired in my first sales job, and I had never been so relieved in my life. I was so excited to lose that job. But then he said something that really hurt my feelings because I was very sensitive. He said, we've invested all this money and probably wasted most of it trying to train you up. Would you do me a favor? If somebody comes in for a tour and no salespeople are available, would you just take them on the tour? And for the love of heaven and earth, don't try to sell them anything. When you get back to the front desk, call a real salesperson out for the close. Well, the problem was so many times we were so busy due to our outside marketing efforts that when I brought them back to the front desk, no one was available. So I was like, all right, at least let me sit down with them and discuss some possibilities if they did want to join. And following me doing this for a few months, in addition to training, they noticed that my closing ratio was nearly 80%. And it was astonishing. How could I go from being one of the worst salespeople that they had ever hired to being one of the top closers in the organization, if not the top closer. And I learned my first lesson in sales. And this becomes true more so for personal trainers. Let me just explain why I'm setting it up like this. The greater the level of risk in the sale, the less pressure and closing techniques work. I mean, when you start asking somebody to make a $30 decision or a few $100 decision, it's very different than asking them to not only make a several $100 decision, in some cases, thousands of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, wherever you're listening to this from. Also, committing to the risk of having to meet somebody and be accountable and co-create with somebody multiple times a week, and the risk of a relationship and the risk of failure. So the greater the risk, the more the sales game changes. And I learned my lesson where when I was taking people on tours, I thought nobody could ever possibly know what the outcome was. I wouldn't make money if they bought. I was no longer in sales. So financially, I had zero skin in the game around what that person's decision was. I knew I wouldn't be found out, or I thought I wouldn't be found out. So I wasn't afraid of judgment. I wasn't afraid of disappointing my boss. I was completely unattached to the outcome. But here's the thing. Like I said, I grew up a deformed kid growing up in Coney Island, Brooklyn, and exercise turned my whole life around. It probably saved my life. So the person in front of me, whilst I was completely detached from whatever decision they would make, I was 100% invested in the trajectory, the journey, which would lead them to a series of decisions that could allow them to experience what I've experienced. I call that originating intention. When something is so sacred for you, you want it for everyone. So I became really invested in these tours, but completely unattached to the outcome. I was doing a lot of things that Doug was talking about because I didn't think I was selling. I was approaching the tour from the perspective of a trainer. So I was trying to find out, like, okay, first of all, what do you really truly want? Not like the weight loss or I want more. And what do you really truly want? And what is the impact of that? What happens when that shows up? How will you know? Like, what's different at some point in the future? Whether that's 1 year, three months, 1 month, 1 week, what changes? What's the context? What else in your life is impacted by this? Who else? What's it like to be you day to day 3 months from now when you're on your way? And what are the indicators versus now? Like, what are your fears? What hasn't worked out in the past? And most importantly, what is working out best for you? What has really worked? Because that shows you what were the environments, the people, the structures, the attributes and strengths and thought processes that this person had that they were able to leverage to create constructive outcomes, because that elevates self-efficacy, and self-efficacy lowers risk. So when perceived value is higher than perceived risk, you're much more likely to make a sale. And then my goal wasn't necessarily to sell something. It was to facilitate a decision. And I didn't care whether it was a no or a yes. I just wanted to facilitate a decision because I knew if they made a decision, a small decision that day, like joining, that could change the trajectory of their entire life. And as we were touring, I would design programs. Each part of the facility was what I would design as a trainer, building that picture, building that experience, and then leading them and asking them to make that decision and what that would look like over the course of the next week and the next month. What are the actions? And those actions correlated with a buying decision. So that was my experience. I was horrible, and I started to learn about sales accidentally. Doug, what's your input?
I want to basically say, Bobby, you're repeating exactly the points I was making. You were instinctively stimulating a sensory perception by asking qualifying questions and then sitting there and listening to their answers and taking that knowledge and information that you've gleaned from those conversations to further the process of putting the prospect in the picture with your goal visualization. Where do you want to be 6 months from now? Where do you want to be a year from now? And then using the skill set that you had as a trainer to give them, the fact that you were there, but most importantly, you were building trust so that, you didn't really need to be, because they've sold themselves just by answering the queries that you posed during your conversations and your tour. Very simple. So yeah, you were doing, without knowing it, you were utilizing a lot of the keys of synesthetic sales, Tony Buzan, again, the inventor of mind mapping, and another chap, I'm drawing a blank on his name, wrote a book called Brain Cell. That gets into where, the practices of all of this can be applied. That's one of the many books I've read over the years that's helped me grow as a sales maker. Simple. I had to interject that, Bobby. Sorry.
No, thanks for interjecting there, because you're right. I didn't know what I was doing, but all I knew is that I cared about what health
Bingo.
and fitness did
That's
to me.
it right there.
And I cared about their experience and their outcomes.
And you earned their trust with that caring. That is key. You were
Spot on.
passionate about what you were selling.
Mhm.
You exuded that enthusiasm in a way that they wanted to get that same feeling. And that's how you sell anybody anything.
Care and carefree as well, taking away that fear of being judged. I never forget a audition I went to, and I always wanted the job so badly. And then this one time, just after my son had been born, I said to my agent, I can't go. I've got no one to look after Sam. And I turned up in the middle of this audition. My son needed feeding, and I had to feed him, and I got the job because I was carefree, but I was caring and I was present within that. I'm aware of the time and people here. And so from that point, fast forward your career and everything you've done, you went through some very serious health implications. Anybody who follows Doug on LinkedIn will know. And I wondered if you could sort of just fill us in to where you got to the virtual roadshow.
Okay. Well, the virtual roadshow started with actual roadshows in 2006. URSA, the trade association, asked me to become the first URSA ambassador in Scandinavia. I've been living in the UK for nigh on 35 years, and I've been working extensively in Scandinavia for about 30, at least, well, maybe not 30, 25. And so I did, and I sat down and I thought, what makes URSA? And it's education and networking. So with that in mind, I got together because I've been speaking all around the world. I knew a lot of the presenters. We were friends. And I asked a few of them to go on the road with me. And so we staged a full day conference, URSA style, where basically we each gave a 1 hour presentation, and we networked with the audience, obviously. So one day we would do Helsinki, and 2 days later we would do Stockholm. 2 days later we would do Oslo, Copenhagen, Vilnius, Tallinn, whatever. And we grew the region in a year and a half by 560%. And URSA adopted that in the early 2000s as a method, because my thing was, well, if Mohammed won't come to the mountain, I'll bring the mountain to Mohammed. I'll demonstrate what, that type of feeling you can get at an URSA conference. Joe, you presented there. Bobby, you were out there briefly. But URSA, one of the big national conventions, and there are others. It is, you get more and better information talking to somebody at the bar quite often than you'll get from one of the presenters. So, I did that. And then in around 2015, 2016, I realized, I started getting more switched on to the internet. I had to, because that was the new method of sales. And I realized, well, what the hell am I paying to fly these guys around, pay their hotel rooms, buy them food, pay their bloody bar tabs, and when I could put them on one place and just stream it. So I was also doing these road shows in, of all places, Kuwait. And I know it's not Scandinavia, but URSA allowed me to do it. And, so I brought Brian O'Rourke, Alan Leach, Dr. Paul Bedford, and who else was there? Michael Scott Scudder was my virtual presenter, but that created the Virtual Roadshow online, because I took the roadshow, we were doing it online, and you weren't really physically there. It was all virtual, thus the Virtual Roadshow online. And we streamed it, I recorded it properly. There was some sound and light issues and things where, things needed to be fixed. But we had a couple thousand people online, in and out. I think 3 people stayed for the full day. I hadn't realized about this thing called time zones. People are not going to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning in New York, or 2 o'clock in the morning in San Diego, to look at something going on. They would get the video after the fact, but not the same impact. So I did it the next year, and I brought it into a TV studio in Stockport in the UK. Everything then, it was like night and day. It was really a much better improvement. In fact, you can actually judge for yourself, because should you download my app, if you just go to the app store of your choice, Virtual Roadshow app, bingo, download it. Right now it's free. You'll see some of those videos from that TV studio from 7 years ago. And they stand as good today. It's Justin Tamset, Dr. Mark Slavin, Adrian Marks, Sandy Kaufman was my virtual presenter, and I'm drawing a blank on the four. Oh, Frank Furness. And these are as relevant today as they were then. So that's why I've uploaded them to show people a little bit what it's all about. And then 2 weeks after that event, like Joe indicated, I got kind of sick. Let me switch that off. Sorry. I should have thrown it into airplane mode. Actually, I just turned the bloody thing off. Anyway, so we took that, I took that illness as times to think about the future, because I was getting older and sales makers coming out of it. I mean, I was in, treatment for almost a year, and came out of it completely healthy. Great. COVID hit for 2 years. Whoops. That basically killed sales makers. I wasn't physically capable of the travel. Things had changed. So then I got sick again. And that's when I realized, wait a minute, what can I do now? And I was kind of pissed off, because I was looking and hearing and reading about all the club closures, the this, the that, and nobody was helping these poor people. There was some con artists out there. Oh yeah, we know what to do. Bullshit. Nobody knew. We'd never had anything like that before. How can you deal with if you don't have the experience? So I met a chap by the name of Rob Lander, who owns a company called Physical, who builds apps for clubs, for members. Brilliant program designed. He's been doing it for 19 years. And very simply, we got together and created the Virtual Roadshow online app. So when I came out of it, and last summer is when I basically really took it, because I realized, you know what? And one of you guys made the comment about retirement, I think it was Bobby. Let me tell you guys, retirement sucks. When you live a fast-paced life, as most of us that do or have done, you can't come to full stop. I'm passionate. I love the industry. I love what it's done for me. It's given me a career I never dreamed of. And I want to give back to all of you guys that have made my life so full. So the Virtual Roadshow app, every Thursday, I upload or live stream a presenter. I've put together a group of 50 individuals called the Speakers Bureau, because I couldn't think of another term. And that actually is now turning into an agency in its own right, with me booking them for different conferences, either virtually or physically. Anyway, what I'm doing is I'm giving the education to everybody, to fitness professionals globally. And it is a subscription model. It's £10 a month, but if you get a subscription code from a supplier that's one of my sponsors, it's completely free. I'm not concerned that much about the money. I want to spread the message. And everybody's talking about AI this, AI that. Well, the strap line with the Virtual Roadshow Online is, we deliver the industry to you with AI, actual intelligence. Because if you add up all the years of experience that Joe and Bobby and the rest of the Speakers Bureau have got, this small group of 40, 50, presenters that I've put together, if you add up all the years of experience, we have over 1,200 years of experience. I'd call that actual intelligence. And I'm just thinking over 1,000 years of experience in the palm of your hand, in your phone, accessible 24/7, 365. Every week there's new content. Everything is archived. There's data about the presenters. You can contact them directly. You can ask them questions and get feedback. It's kind of cool. And I hope to turn this into a portal for our industry where, I mean, have you ever gone to a conference and, you've seen somebody give a presentation and you go back to your club or your center or you're trying to explain what you saw to somebody, and let's just say it kind of changed the message a bit. It's what in the States we call Chinese whisper or whisper down the lane. You whisper in an ear of somebody, and then they're supposed to tell the person next to them by the time it gets to the end of the line, it's a completely different message. That's what happens too often. But with the app, you can watch a virtual roadshow. You like something, you get your group together, you sit them down, and you discuss it. You freeze frame, you pause, you go back. Let's rewind. Let's go through that again. I don't think I'm clear on what she said. And wait a minute, I want a copy of that slide. Hold that freeze frame. This is what the virtual roadshow gives the world, now. So on the 5th of June, here in the UK, there's a company called Leisure Database. They've been collating fiscal financial data from clubs here, and this past year they audited over 7,000 clubs. And on the 5th of June, the founder, David Minton, is going to be presenting their findings of what is the state of the UK fitness industry. And they've got data down to, it's ridiculous the data they've got. So Pete Cohen is going to be the compere for the day. David kicks it off. Then there's a panel discussion with Philip Mills and other UK, top operators, there on a panel discussion. And then we brought over Casey Conrad from the States. She's going to be basically interpreting the data and what could be done to improve the state of the industry. Then a coffee break, and it's followed by another roundtable, more interaction amongst industry, movers and shakers over here. And then followed up last with one of the foremost biohackers who's giving his presentation. I am going to be live streaming this event from start to finish. This is possibly one of, if not the first, pure hybrid conferences in the world. I'm flying out on the 27th of May to meet with the organizers of Rimini Wellness, Dubai Active, and Riyadh Active to discuss doing the same thing with air shows next year. So it's the Roadshow Online is the website, Roadshow app is my app, and Roadshow Live, Virtual Roadshow Live, is when I have a live audience and it's streamed and it's archived in the app. There's nothing else like it, I think. And this came from 2 years of being deathly sick and 2 years of COVID. How can I help? And my mission statement, our aim is to help you improve the fiscal business of your fitness business. And there's every week there's a different topic. Joe guested us and graced us yesterday. Bobby, we need to talk about when you're coming on board, partner. And, there is some archive footage. This week, you got to put up with me again because I'm going to give the whole really fleshed out story of the Virtual Roadshow, but also explain how you can use every single aspect of it. And I've got a calendar of every fitness event going on globally, with links to it. And there's all kinds of things that are there. And there's a few things, if I could figure out how to turn it into a social media vehicle, I would. But I don't want to be editing people's comments and stuff is the only reason I don't do it. But if I could figure out a way where we could have a dialogue I think that would be really cool. But I haven't figured that bit out yet. But I'm learning. Every day I get new ideas of how to put into this thing. So I am still retired, guys. This is my hobby.
Thank
Which
you
is a whole hell of a lot
much.
like work.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I don't know about anybody else, but there was some really lovely moments as you were talking there, Doug, particularly as the emotion came through of how much it means to you to give back. I think that really came out. I know that we've been here for an hour, so I just wanted to say if anybody here very, very quickly has a very short question for Doug, because I think otherwise people have to get off and on with their day. But yes, I think Jeff's got a question.
Shoot.
I was trying to get back what you say about the British about clueless. That part.
About what?
Clueless in business. Uh,
Okay. When I came over to the UK, they did not have salespeople. They either had their trainers trying to sell the customers in between their sessions, but when I came over here, they didn't have personal trainers. They had trainers. They had staff, like everybody in the US at the same time. When I started, I mean, personal training got invented. And then because they were training personally, thus the PT thing came on board. But the club owner operators were spending a ton of money on this, advertising and doing things, getting people through the door, but there was nobody there to really deal with the consumer. And I used to ask this in my lectures, what percentage of your income in your club comes from membership? And the answer normally would be over 90%. I said, why don't you have a sales staff dealing with the most important aspect of your business? So when I say clueless, they didn't have any idea of what was really and truly important. Now I'm going to just fast future a wee bit. So many of the clubs today are talking about AI and this and that. And so many people don't have sales teams. They're relying on the internet or this and that, or deep discounts or whatever. I do predict in the future, and it's going to happen soon, I believe, sales and salesmanship and health clubs is going to go away the way of the dodo. But what is going to replace it, in my guesstimation, is all of the better clubs are going to have concierges, people who are there to help and assist the customers and answer any and all of their questions, with hopefully the end result they get enough information to to buy. Again, a saying I used to use, when a salesperson is talking to a consumer, anytime someone tells you no to your sales question, I want you to interpret that what they have asked you is, I don't know, KNOW, enough to say yes. They are asking you for more information so they can reach a new decision. And that's the decision, which is to buy.
Thank you.
You're very welcome, my friend.
I'm just going to press pause on the recording now. So thank you very much for everybody that's come here today. And thank you, Doug.